Hi there, Henry from 911 Virgin, the Porsche people in Uxbridge. Welcome to another video. In our last video we did the 993 RS and we talked about how Porsche were very much involved in racing and how the RS evolved from the race cars. And I said that Porsche produced pure race cars. You could go to the factory and you could buy a race car never designed to go on the road and go racing in it. And so this video, someone in the comments section mentioned, what about doing a 996 GT3? And the 996 GT3 is very much a car after my own heart. And so that's what we're going to do, 996 GT3. Why do I say the 996 GT3 is a car after my own heart? Well, really, because of this. This is a 996 GT3 Cup car, and I spent a lot of time in this car. It's, as race cars go, it's done a fair bit of work, done some races, done some 24-hour races. It's done, I don't know, 42,000 kilometres. It's a bit like Trigger's broom. Everything's been replaced on it. But yeah, it's kind of been my office for quite a few years. I don't race it now, I don't race now, but I used to do, only played at it, but had a lot of fun in the car, a lot of memories. And so the 996 GT3, as I say, for me personally, you know, once you've been out on track and raced in cars, I think you really understand the true ethos and the true thinking and meaning behind cars, and particularly with a Porsche, because for me Porsche are all about race cars. There was a time in the, I don't know, I'm going to say mid-90s, when Porsche's future didn't look massively rosy. They were having some kind of financial issues and of one thing and another. And there was talk at the time of potentially, I think it was Volkswagen taking them over, and Porsche were going to be not demoted, but in effect sidelined into VW Audi's motorsport division. And so they weren't going to produce cars, they were just going to do race cars. And that is really how embroiled and embodied in racing and race technology Porsche are. So if you take a kind of race car and then a Porsche race car, I think you're getting to the absolute DNA of what a Porsche is all about. And it's when you take cars on the track and you start racing them that you realise what a phenomenal car a Porsche is. Good as this car is, and I'll do a little video kind of talking you through this just to show you why you can't drive it on the road, because lovely and good as it is, we cannot drive this car on the road. It's not legal, it will never be legal. It has certain things, or hasn't got certain things, which would be required to drive on the road. For instance, it's got no cooling fans, so if you're sat in traffic and you're not moving forward, the engine will overheat. It's working on the assumption that you're going to be going forward at a fairly rapid rate of knots, and so air will be drawn into the cooling radiators and your engine will stay cool. So Porsche produced a road-going version of this, and we have two over here. The 996, so we did the 993, we've done the 993 C4S, we did the 993 RS. The model which followed on from the 993 was the 996, and it came out in 1998, and it was a complete redesign of the car. It's a completely different body shell, and very importantly, it's a completely different engine. The 996 is the first of the water-cooled engines. So up to that point, all Porsche 911s were air-cooled, or all road-going Porsches were air-cooled. But with the 996, Porsche wanted to introduce 4-valve cylinder head technology. So they wanted to go multi-valve. You wanted to have 2 inlet valves and 2 exhaust valves. And to do that, you need to have water cooling. It wasn't feasible to have 4-valve cylinder heads on an air-cooled engine. So Porsche designed a brand new engine which was water-cooled. Mark 1 GT3 came out in 1999, 3.6 litre, 360 odd horsepower, I think 355, 360 horsepower, somewhere around there. So it's not bad. I have a formula that says you need 300 horsepower in a car for it to be exciting. So at 355, 360, potentially there's enough. Mark 2 GT3 came out 2003. You can see the styling has been changed. One of the complaints with the early 996s is that 911 owners felt it's a bit unfair that you couldn't distinguish between a Porsche Boxster, which was kind of half the price of a 911, and a Porsche 911. So in 2001, Porsche redesigned the front end of the 996 to the facelift car, and the GT3 also got the same treatment, and it does actually bear some benefits. It makes it a bit more slippery, it gives a little bit more downforce. They also increased the engine power from kind of 360 to about 380, so an extra little tweak of power in there as well. The Mark II GT3 was built on a Carrera 4 body shell rather than a Carrera 2 body shell, and that gives it a little bit of extra torsional rigidity as well. On the Mark II GT3, as well as the change of wheel design, they also changed the front calipers on the car, and so they went from a 4-pot caliper, so 2 pistons either side, to a 6-pot caliper. So it's a much bigger caliper, gives it more gripping force. So you've got 3 pistons each side, so 6-pot calipers on these, so slightly revised braking as well. They also had a third variation, which I don't have here. There was an RS which came out in 2003, I think I'm right in saying. It was produced 2003, 4 and I think 5. And that sought to bridge the gap between that car and that car even further. There were some lightweight panels. You got the cutouts to allow airflow into the front of the car and the rads and so on. It had some lightweight glazing panels in there, and the suspension was essentially cup suspension. So if you said, look, we're going to put this on the track and do a load of track days, the RS was a potential option for you. If we come around the back, you'll see some changes in the treatment of the rear of the cars as well. So a Mark 1 GT3 had this spoiler here, and there was some scope to just tweak the angle of this a little bit. So if you were going to do track days and wanted to put additional downforce on there, you could have a little tweak and a little play with that. Standard wheels, so these are Mark 1 GT3 alloys on there, and they all came with those as standard. And then the Mark II GT3 had a slightly different design. It's a one-piece composite panel, so it's a slightly lighter panel. And when you look at these, you won't be able to catch it, but you almost see the finish on them it's kind of not quite perfect. You can see the kind of layup of the composite panels underneath slightly, and when you first see one, you think, oh, this has been painted, it's horrible, and that's just how they are. So they're quite an unusual car there. And then obviously the race car has something that's kind of big enough to, we can host a banquet on that one. So, but that's a slightly different spoiler, which is these are, as I say, they're like Trigger's broom and they kind of evolve. So we put a big spoiler on that one just to help give us a bit of downforce. When you talk about GT3s, a man's name immediately comes to your mind, a man called Hans Metzger. Please forgive me if I don't pronounce his name quite right. The engines in these cars are referred to as a Metzger 911 engine. And when the 996 was introduced, it was water cooled, and they did that to put the 4-valve the technology in the heads so they could get more power, which is what they wanted to do. But it also became a wet sump engine, so the oil that's used for lubrication drains down to the bottom of the engine. It's then got a scavenge pump which sucks it up, sends it through the engine, and it lubricates and then falls down to the bottom again. The problem is, if you drive one of these hard in a race situation, you're putting a lot of sideways G-force on the car, and that swishes the oil around. And so you can have a problem with a wet sump engine whereby you get oil surge and oil starvation, so too much oil comes in or you get too little oil. And if you can imagine, if you've got a scavenge system here and all the oil goes away and you're just drawing in thin air, that's a bad day in the office, because engines don't like not to have oil. They go bang very quickly. So Porsche had to find a way around this, and they'd come across this problem before. The 993, although it's an air-cooled engine, in the race version, the GT1, they wanted to have 4-valve technology on their engines to give it more power. And so they went for a kind of half and half, and they had an air-cooled bottom end married to water-cooled top end. And they had 6 individual water-cooled cylinder heads, and they could be 4 valves per cylinder head, and that gave them the power, and they were water-cooled. The Porsche 959 did a similar thing, but not quite the same. They used the air-cooled bottom end, and they married it with a water-cooled top end, but instead of having 6 individual water-cooled cylinder heads, they had 1 cylinder head per side. So each cylinder head served 3 cylinders, and that's the solution which was arrived at for the GT3. So it enabled you to have a dry sump engine. You could have your oil held in a tank, separate sort of tank, rather than the sump underneath. You draw it out of the tank, pump it through the engine, do your lubrication, and return it to the oil tank. And so the bottom half of the engine is in effect air-cooled technology, top half is water-cooled technology, and to make things even more complicated, or because you're using the bottom half of the engine with air-cooled technology, the gearbox is also air-cooled technology as well. I don't know if you can see the cat here, another one of our little creatures that we have. You've probably seen the dog, I think, in one of the videos, and there's the cat as our company cat. So we don't have a mouse problem here. He takes care of them. And the advantage that came with those gearboxes is you could change the ratios in them quite easily. And so it meant that if you were going to do a race, let's say someone like Spa-Francorchamps, where you have a straight that goes on forever and a day, you're going to reach really high top end speeds. If you're racing at a tight little circuit like, let's say, the Brands Hatch Indy circuit, you're never going to use the higher gears, so you'll bring the whole ratio set of the gearboxes down so that you've got a better selection of gears for the speeds that you're going to need, and you can pull out, you always got the right gear for each corner essentially. So whilst the power output changed slightly, the engine in the Mark 1 is essentially the same as the engine not only in the Mark 2 GT3 but even in the full race car. When you first look in, you think, well, it's not quite the same. The difference is it's missing it. There's a big air filter in the road cars, whereas this has a much smaller air filter. But essentially, when you bought your GT3, you really were getting the Cup car technology. It was the same engine in this. This is a 380 horsepower engine. So it's not that the race car has 450 or 500 horsepower and you've got a far lesser version in there. This is a 380 horsepower. It's exactly the same engine as that car. The only difference is the suspension platform is different, and so we eke out speed through lightness and through chassis development, because obviously we can afford to be incredibly stiff. It's got one job to do. It hasn't got to do anything other than go normally clockwise around a race circuit. So what are we missing here? This car was introduced, the Mark 1 GT3 was introduced as an FIA homologation special. So it's got motorsport DNA in it, absolutely for sure. 106 UK right-hand drive Mark 1s. I think I'm right in saying 239 UK right-hand drive Mark 2s. Of which this car is. The predecessor to this, the 993 RS, £300,000. Predecessor to that, 964 RS, I don't know, a couple £100,000, something like this. This car, under £65,000. So something's not right here. This car is either massively undervalued or it's horrible to drive. So far, it feels alright. So maybe it's like an engine thing, maybe the engine's rubbish in this, but people think 996 engines made of cheese, IMS bearing, all that kind of shenanigans. But this isn't a 996 engine. This is a GT1 stroke 959 engine. It's a legendary Metzger engine. The pedigree of this thing is phenomenal. Engines don't come any better. Maybe it's underpowered, I don't know. Maybe there's no power in it. Well, no, that seems alright. 380 horsepower. What do you reckon, Ems? Is there a bit of power in there?
Not at all, and you'll see it in my filming.
So even Ems says her filming, you see, is showing you how much power it is. And it's a nice power delivery as well, because it's normally aspirated. It's really controllable. You know, you can steer this as much on the throttle as you do on the steering wheel. Whereas turbocharged cars, sometimes it's a shunt of power, but it hasn't got that delicacy or delicateness of how you deliver the power. With this, not only is the steering sharp, but the engine power delivery, it's beautiful and linear. It doesn't suddenly bite you at any point. So again, it's not an engine thing. I'm a bit baffled by this car. What is it that I see in them that you guys aren't? Because this is a fifth of the price of a 993 RS. A fifth of the price. This is a bargain. We're giving this car away. I think I might buy all the GT3s in the country and just put them in a big shed until you guys realise how good they are. Because this is bloody lovely. You can obviously feel it is a sports car. On rough roads you're going to get thrown about a little bit. There's always a bit of debate between the Mark 1 and Mark 2 GT3s. Some people think the Mark 1s are a slightly purer car than the Mark 2. I don't know. I mean, the Mark 1 was built at Weissach, which was is the motorsport area where the motorsport cars were built, because the Mark 1s were built as an FIA homologation car. Mark 2s were built on the main production line. And, you know, maybe there's a bit of kind of one-upmanship in terms of people with Mark 1 cars, you know, feel that because it was built in another shed, it's kind of somehow different. But then the Mark 2 has a stiffer body shell because it was built on a Carrera 4 shell as opposed to a Carrera 2 shell. So, you know, I'm not convinced one is better and one is worse. And also, I think as time goes on, you can tweak the handling and the suspension of the car to suit yourself. There's a lot of companies who will set the suspension up for you, something like Centre Gravity, you know, phenomenally good at what they do, and they can dial in settings on the car so it handles exactly as you want it to. And you know, there is that scope for adjustment on it, but as a base car, again, feels really nice. It's totally predictable, and it's helping you out. You've got ABS brakes on there. There's no electronics to kind of save you as there are in later cars, so it is down to you to kind of behave and learn to drive the car. But yeah, it's really good. There you go, 996 GT3. If I'm being honest, I'm a bit baffled. There are Porsches out there for far more money that are far less worthy than this car. It's a great car. I don't make the rules in terms of valuing these things. You know, why is it? I suspect it's probably, you know, the 996 has always been an economic way into 911 ownership. It replaced the legendary 993, which looked lovely, air-cooled engine, fantastic engineering. Along came this water-cooled engine, different styling, different production techniques. You know, Toyota get involved, they try and make cars economically, which they had to do, otherwise Porsche were going to go out of business. And so I guess, you know, maybe even kind of engine reliability, but this isn't a 996 engine. It's a Metzger engine in this, which is totally different. So, you know, to me, I think these are just phenomenal value. And I suspect in a few years' time, the world will wake up and realise how good they are. When you see, you know, to get GT cars anywhere else in the Porsche lineup, you're paying a load of money. You know, we're not giving the things away in that, you know, you can't buy this for £10,000. You've still got to come with, you know, several tens of thousands of pounds to buy it, but I don't think they're stratospheric money, and I think the car is worth far more than the values. You know, production numbers are low. You know, there's not thousands and thousands of these out on the road. They're a small batch produced car. It's a firm ride, but you know, that's how they are. You could level the same argument at the 993 RS or the 964 RS. They're also, you know, a firm ride, and it's the nature of the beast. If you want a more friendly ride for the road, there are other cars within the lineup, but a track-focused Porsche, which I think is the sort of centre point for the kind of collectible Porsches. You know, I give you the 996 GT3, and I think in the competition, I've got a pretty strong hand. So yeah, great car. Next video I'm going to do will be the 996 GT3 Cup car. I'm just going to talk you around it a little bit and just give you an insight into, you know, what a race car is like, really, what bits and pieces you have on them. You often kind of see them from the outside but not the inside, so yeah, we'll have a little chat about that and go through that. In the meantime, I'm Henry, we're 911 Virgin, the Porsche people in Uxbridge. Many thanks for watching, especially thanks to all of you who are subscribing to our YouTube channel and also taking the time to comment. Much appreciated, and we try and respond to the comments as they arrive, so thank you very much. And yeah, stay safe, have fun, look after yourselves. Goodbye.